red line, no options off the table. You know how sick I am of hearing these BS lines? How about, again, when you look at the reports coming out from the United Nations saying that, hey, wait a minute, it wasn't the Syrian government that used those chemical weapons, it was the rebels. Yeah, no, don't believe them, believe us. We're going to use the same investigators that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So it's one lie built upon another. And again, when all else fails, with the economy declining, they take you to war.
Is this going to be the final nail in the coffin for the economy? I mean, is this going to kibosh the QE, kill what's remaining of the weak economy? If oil gets cut off, or if Iran does strike Israel, is Israel going to then strike Iran's nuclear program? Are they going to shut off the Strait of Hormuz? Are they going to close down, the Suez Canal? Are they going to start choking the lifeblood oil of the world, and everything, shoots up? Gas is $8, $9, $10 a gallon. Interest rate swaps go haywire. Markets implode. Could that happen? Will that happen?
All of the above. All of the above. As I've said many times, if Israel attacks Iran, it's the beginning of World War III. I've said this scenario, it has to be a couple of hundred times. History is repeating itself. The panic of '08 mirrors the crash of 1929. Following the crash of 1929, we went into the Great Depression. There's a depression going on. You look at John Williams' shadow stats. It's 23% unemployment when you look at the people that have dropped off the unemployment rolls, temporary workers and part-time workers wanting full-time jobs. You look at the unemployment rate in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy. These are depression level in some of those areas, and they still call them a recession. Almost 28% in Greece and Spain, and they're still calling it a recession. Again, crash, depression, currency wars. There's currency wars going on. All of the countries, Japan, United States, Europeans, the Chinese, they're all trying to devalue their currencies so they can export more product. Trade wars and then real wars. And that's what we're seeing again. You had mentioned briefly about the ports in Syria, where the Russians use as a port, as well as the Chinese. It's the only port in the Mediterranean that's open to either the Russians or the Chinese. This is a proxy war against Iran, because once Syria is choked off and choked, then Iran is left alone, surrounded by enemies. So that's what we're really looking at here. The end game is Iran, and as I've said also, these are the Persians. They've been around a long time. This isn't beating Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or Assad. This is a real power. People forget that Iraq fought Iran for 8 years in the 1980s, a war started, by the way, by Jimmy Carter, carried on by Reagan. And the Iranians lost 1 million people and didn't give up 1 inch of land.
Gerald Celente, so if we're going to be looking at this Syrian situation, where are we going to be in 6 months, in a year, or 3 months?
It's hard to go by a timetable, because when you even listen to the Syrians and the Iranians, I mean, Syria's no match for Israel. They have these old MiGs, I mean, Israel has the most advanced weaponry outside the United States. So they're not going to do anything. You're going to see it, I believe, in forms of what they're going to call terror strikes. Maybe a little dirty bomb going off over, maybe in Tel Aviv. That kind of thing happening. And then escalating from there. And I don't believe Iran is not going to attack anybody. Iran will respond to an attack but they won't initiate one. But of course I say that, but who knows how it will be framed? Because after all, Greg, you certainly remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident that got the United States into the Vietnam War.
Total lie.
And it was a big lie. It never happened the way they said it did. And you also, as I mentioned, you remember how we began the Iraq War. You know, it was because of weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda that didn't exist. But who cares? And then, of course, there was the Afghan War. You remember what we were going to Afghanistan for, or maybe you forgot. It was to get those bad guys, them Al-Qaedas, and Saddam, what's his name? Osama bin Laden. And that's why we went into Afghanistan. And again, we've written about this in chapter and verse about all the lies that were told and how they're forgotten and how the wars continue.
I guess your prognosis for the next year or two, it looks like we're going to be into some pretty heavy war, if not a world war. Is that right?
Yes. And what's the saddest thing about it, particularly in America, is that this is so against what this nation was founded upon, the beliefs of our founding fathers, and where it's been taken by presidential psychopaths and sociopaths. You know, George Washington, I mean, there was a real commander-in-chief, not one that plays basketball or was in the National Guard or never in the military. And of course, I'm going back to Obama, Bush, II, and Clinton. And they're not commanders-in-chief. If they're commanders-in-chief, let them lead the charge. And when I talk about America, of course, you know, I know the slaughter that went on and how of the native populations and the inequalities that existed in this country in its growing stages. Nonetheless, this was a great country at one time. And now it's totally off base upon which it was founded upon. There should be outrage from every American citizen about becoming involved in foreign entanglements. And I wrote about the blowback that would happen long before it's happened. In my books, Trends 2000, I coined the term Crusades 2000. The United States would be waking up in the new millennium, and the Crusades would be raging. I wrote that back in 1995. So you can see where all this is leading, and sadly it's leading us down the path of destruction, and in a way that's so against everything that this nation has been founded upon.
You are predicting world war coming. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I am, as if the trends continue and if the people don't do something to stop it. You know, one of our trends journals, the top trends for 2012, I have the solution. Gerald Celente's 4 rules of peace. Rule number 1. Any commander-in-chief, prime minister, chancellor that declares war against another country has to lead the charge. If it was good enough for Washington and Napoleon and Alexander the Great, it should be good enough for these guys. And if they don't want to lead the charge, then let's have the world leader face-off, fight to the finish at the Arena di Verona, that beautifully restored Roman amphitheater in Verona. And let them go at it. You want to take the cat out? Go for it. Rule number 2. Anybody that's for war, and I remember what happened with the Iraq War and the Afghan War. I saw more yellow ribbons and American flags flying than you could imagine in a lifetime. Anybody that supports the war, go fight the war. And if you can't fight the war because you're too elderly or infirm, send your money, send your kids, and send your wife and whoever else to go do the fighting. They need you over there. We're outsourcing all our war support to military contractors. Rule number 3, the golden rule. When they retaliate, don't cry and bellyache and call it terrorism. It's payback. And rule number 4, let the people vote. The burden of the war falls on our shoulders. I mentioned the 58,000 that were killed in Vietnam, the 250,000 that have committed suicide. I've mentioned, how about all those Iraqi and Afghan veterans that have fought wars for nothing, and the dead ones, 6 dead this week in Afghanistan, and their families that have been ruined. So let the people vote. We do not have a representative form of government in the United States. We have a gang of 535 senators and congressmen deciding for 315 million of us. If we could vote online, if we could bank online, we could vote online. Let the people vote to go to war. And you will see, if Gerald Celente's 4 rules of peace are initiated, there will be no more wars.